Welcome. I'm Linda Guild. I am the CEO of the Talented Alliance of Part-Time Professionals. And today I'm here with Erica Ballard. She is the CEO of retainHER. It is a company which provides data and insights for companies to help them retain, recruit, and advance their basically women. Correct? I just want to make sure I get it correct. And we're so excited to have you here today. And Erica has this long list of accomplishments that I decided just to go really brief instead of trying to go through this list of her degrees and all the places that she can be found. And we will at the end give her a chance to share that. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about retainHER and the story behind it. I'd love to learn more.
Sure. So I'll give you the full story. So I started my entrepreneurship journey about 4.5 years ago as a health coach. And, whenever I spoke with my women, and men, but primarily women, they were never like, wait a second, I should eat more vegetables and eat less sugar. Tell me more. That wasn't where the education or the know-how was lacking. It was always, I don't have enough time. Work is crazy. Home life is bananas, right? And it was that was it over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And when I got pregnant with my daughter, I'm a meditator. I do all these things. I'm sitting there. You're thinking about, legacy. You're thinking about what are you going to give to this kid? You know what I mean? Like all these things come up when you're pregnant as a parent. And the download that I got was focus on the actual issue. Mm-hmm. Like the issue was never food. The issue was never diet. The issue was never health. It was, do I feel like I deserve this? And am I in spaces that acknowledge I do and give me space to go after what I want? And I was like, oh man, like that feels big. And, but I followed the whispers. I was like, okay, I'll explore this. I'll see where it goes. And what ended up happening because of my background in research and science and communications and all the things, out came a data company, a research company that really helps organizations look at what has to happen to retain, recruit, and promote women. And the focus for me is when you really do look at the research, and women are leaving at a higher rate, right? Yep. Women are the ones most impacted, particularly when they have kids and when they're caring for elder people or elder family members.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's all of that. And anecdotally, when I helped men who I loved, they got better. They got healthier. Mm-hmm. Their life got in order. When I helped women, entire families changed. You know what I mean? Like everyone changed. So I was like, okay, this download, I followed it. It feels huge. And it also feels like it's what I'm supposed to do. And so that is how retainHER was born. When my daughter was 6 months pregnant, when I was 6 months pregnant, she came out, you have your rest. And then since November, end of November, early December, have really been showing up, having this conversation as it feels just so important, particularly right now, post-pandemic, all the stuff that we know. So yeah, that's how it's come up. And like you said, what we do is we go into companies, and a lot of companies don't even know where to start with KPIs and mm-hmm. or goals. And we say, okay, before you go and try to fix everything, what's actually happening? Like, let's take a look at what it looks like for working women in your workplace as opposed to working men. So we look at both genders, or women, men, and non-binary. We look at all of it and we say, okay, what's happening? What's the difference? And then we break it apart even further and saying, okay, well, what about a woman who has kids? What about a dad who has kids? What about a woman who has kids with this background, et cetera, so that we can say, okay, with all of this, if you want to move the needle, these are your unique challenges as a corporation. And then these are your these are the unique challenges within the individual, because we also know that we have to do the work to advance as well, we as women.
That's awesome. So what is your ideal company that you've worked with?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I work with organizations who already have identified that there's an issue. So instead of the education of going in and being like, listen, women matter, and they say people making it, like, I'm not here from that diagnostic tool, like for that unique tool to sit there and convince everybody. Like, I work with companies who already know women are valuable. We want to keep them. And they've done some research on what their retention rates look like around women. So that group, that mindset. And then for us, about around 1,000 to 5,000 or 500 to 5,000 is an ideal. Because of the way that we do data, we want to make sure that it's anonymized. And it's hard to anonymize 100 pieces of data.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So we work with a bit bigger organizations to provide that information. And then as far as like any of the other pieces, like we don't care what industry we're in. We're indifferent to those things. We really are looking for who is already doing the work, who needs some support to continue it, who wants to see more women in leadership and in management. And then are they among the size? And if they are, we're there to help them and support them.
Wonderful. So when you've done it, have you seen differences in industries? Because obviously you said that when you come in, they already have a mindset. But I definitely feel like industries have personalities or attract personalities.
I mean, you should say that again, because ain't that the truth? Like, like they sure do. So yes, the data is really unique because, say, a marketing or communication firm that is usually predominantly women, looks a lot different than, say, a tech company that is predominantly not only male but also white, right? So the unique challenges between them are different. So we do see that, and the thing that I do think is interesting, no matter where you look, is often the underpinnings of the unconscious gender bias tend to be the same. And then the simple solutions that can move you forward are also the same.
Oh, okay. So once you've taken the data, then do you sit down with leadership? Like, where do you go? You help them understand where they're at. And I know obviously what your goal is. So how do you work with do you walk alongside them to help them implement stuff? Like, what's the next step once you have some of this data?
Yes, it's twofold. One, it is we walk alongside with them to help implement and measure, because what we think is really important is that if you're going to do this, you got to measure what works and what doesn't. Otherwise, we're back to throwing spaghetti against the wall. People are getting mad that these programs aren't working. Like all the things that I get, right? Like I get it. You implemented this thing, you want it to work. So we walk alongside, we look at it, and then we also measure whatever comes in to see, are we moving the needle? Like almost pulse surveys, right? Like, is this moving? Is this working? Are we seeing unconscious bias moving? Are we seeing management bring up women, depending on what we recommend? Which then goes to the second piece, is we recommend, what do you do? And then we bring in partners. So I talked with a couple groups, like I think it's called the 9-month club. I think they're amazing. And they help moms get their babies to sleep. That's what they do they go into corporations and they work individually with women or as a group to say, here's some of the best sleep practices, here's what's going on. And they provide really amazing prenatal care up to the point so we can, do all those things right. I can't do that. Like I can't, but if you have a whole bunch of new moms in place, there could potentially be a great recommendation, right? Like say, hey, bring these people in for peanuts, essentially, to keep this woman. Peanuts being that it would cost less to bring them in than to lose a person.
Right. Yeah.
And help the majority of these moms, right? Do this thing. Or we could say, hey, women aren't advancing as quickly as we'd like them to within leadership. And we know that the management rung is how they get up, right? Certain management rungs is how they get up there. We'll say, okay, well, we want unconscious bias training for managers. And we can step back and say, are we the best people to lead those workshops? Or do we have partners that we really enjoy that can do that? And if we think their partners are better, then we'll walk alongside them and measure instead of putting ourselves in there. Because there's enough business around this stuff to go around that we don't need to be the experts at everything. What we need to do is say, what does this data say? What are the recommendations? How do we measure what we are putting in works? And if it isn't working, what do we need to do from there to shift?
And then I think having you consistently there probably also helps to understand how long should you be allowing things to work. Because I think we as humans want something to change overnight. And you know, your experience probably comes in and says, in our experience, you know, obviously the 9-month club, there's windows where babies aren't sleeping, and which means parents aren't sleeping.
Right.
And all of that, which is different. Like, so when the kids are 18, they don't need that person anymore, hopefully. But with the other, you know, the bias training, that's not an overnight change, because certain things may not come up at certain times a year too, I would think, you know, depending on how they do their, you know, are they public, are they private? You know, when do they do a lot of their advancement? You know, not some companies are really on cycles.
Yeah, you know, when I coach, I always tell people, listen, I do a 4-month package because at 3 months shit hits the fan. Like, that's what happens. Like
that's awesome. I love it.
Right. Like, and it is so true, right? We're like, okay, habits take this long and da 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 da. And it's like, I swear, it's like universe, I don't know, like, it's like, I'm going to test you. You want to make that change? You did the good work. Okay, cool. I see you. Boom. Let's make sure you really know what you know. Like, let's make sure you really do what you do. And I mean, I really haven't seen it without fail. Like, within like 2.5, 3 months, right? The big, like, certain things come to the surface, because once you start doing the work and places like people feel safe, in addition to like a person feels safe in coaching, right? Then more stuff comes out. And then it's like, when that stuff comes out, we say, okay, is this true or false? Not necessarily for the person, but like, is this true or false for the company? And what do we need to do then? And I think that that's the piece, like the big scary question, really, right? We're all asking within the DE&I space is, how long does it take to create an inclusive culture? And here's the rub: we don't have an answer.
It's going to be a long time, I think. You know, I mean, our biases didn't come overnight.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You know, they're generations old to a large degree. And so it's I think what I love, because you're coming at it from a data perspective. So, and you're seeing it over industries, right? So I think that's what's kind of cool, is you're seeing things and saying, what, but it still comes to this. And now this is what I'm seeing here, so I can make these recommendations. You know, when I was looking at your website as part of my prep, you were talking about flexibility. And I'd love to understand from your perspective, what do you see as flexibility? And, you know, where can we learn from, you know, because that word's being bandied around so much. And technically it probably has 1 or 2 definitions, but I feel like it has many different meanings. So
yeah, so I think flexibility, I think this is also really important, is that when we talk about flexibility, we tend to be talking about salaried employees or people who have agreed to work 20 hours, right, on a different schedule. Because when it comes to hourly, flexibility or that constant change actually works against them, right? That actually is a huge detriment. So when I say that, I think, one, that's a really important caveat, right, when we have this conversation, because a lot of us who are saying it are those who are making a certain salary number, right, and above, and have that. So when I think about flexibility, in my eyes, it's really more so a results-oriented business model, right? So instead of us saying, okay, you need to be, like, you can do whatever you want whenever you want. No, that's actually not flexibility. What flexibility is saying, hey, we need these things done from you, and we trust you enough to do it on your own time. And so we're going to give you flexibility on your schedule. All that being said, I think that still leads to issues, right, within organizations, because there's meetings that have to be had. And so I think the Slack is actually one of my favorite groups that does it. Is they'll say, we need these hours throughout the week for meeting times, and they'll say, like, Monday is Eastern time, Tuesday is Mountain time, standard, you know, Wednesday Central, and then there's Pacific somewhere in there, right? And so like these are the hours that we need you to be available. And then the rest of the time, it's results oriented. Do what you need to do, but get your work done. And for me, that's what I think when I think about flexibility. It's giving people the power to get the work done when the work needs to be done, while also understanding that businesses have to operate, managers need to check in, like, you know, all these things have to happen, and creating a schedule that allows for results oriented businesses. And I just want to say, like, as I'm saying that, I'm like, doesn't that feel so obvious? And yet we get into debates about it. Like, oh, it'll never work. What do you mean? Like, what do you mean it will never work? It's just what you've defined it as versus what they define it as. We're always nitpicking. And I'm like, it's the same thing with like equity. They're like, why would moms deserve more leave than men? I pushed the baby out. Like, that's why. Like my body needs to recover.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's a different
you
ballgame.
does that mean that I'm unequal because I pushed out a child? No, it just means equity, not equality. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
These are the things that like just jumble around in my mind all the time.
Well, I mean, I think what you were also saying with the flexibility, and it seems obvious, I think part of it is we're not good communicators, right? So if we haven't had that communication of saying, hey, I need you accessible during certain hours because, not because I'm checking in on you, but because, you know, and this still happens, like our clients call between these hours. We'd like our clients to think that someone actually works here, you know, because you can't call someone back at 10 o'clock at night. It doesn't work. You know, it may be, you know, we don't do a good enough job, I think, as managers and owners of saying, hey, this is why I want something. We make it as because I said so, or because it's always been that way. And you have to change some of that, right? And create something that has that fluidity, but that understanding of why, you know, like, how is that going to work? Okay. You know, if 10 Mountain Time is, I mean, I know what time it is. It's noon, but and it's noon Boston time, but that's when my child is normally picked up from preschool. Now I need to push back and say, hey, can we shift this? And this is why too, and have that safety, I think.
That safety is a big piece of it, right? And I think that the reason why this dialogue does feel so challenging for so many organizations is it feels obvious, particularly to women with kids who work, right? But we truly are asking for a bit of a fundamental shift on what business looks like, because business, whether or not we want to believe it or not, is built on built on the ideal worker myth, which is a man, right? Somebody who has someone like from the 1950s, it has someone to take care of his brood and like, right.
And an assistant that did things.
Yeah. But we really haven't shifted that model. And so what we're challenging managers with, and I do understand this, is most of us, myself included, right? Like, we've come up and have been taught, like, this is how you manage with people in the office. These are the type of questions. This is how you check in. This is how you do these things. And we're not arming them with the tools necessary to reconfigure how they manage. And that's why when I said earlier, like, hey, there's certain things that are just are the exact same across the board. A lot of it is this training of managers, because they're not failing organizations. They just don't know how to do it differently. But the thing that's really important is that managers are who move people up. So if they have the bias of all of these, like, men are better leaders, this is how you're supposed to be working, this is how you can tell if someone's available, then it's really hard to get women in leadership, because the base says, because we haven't taught them a different base than what they have.
And I think we also just don't teach managers how to manage sometimes too. So you have that whole issue along with it. You did mention 20 hours a week. And as you know, we're an organization for part-time. How much are you seeing in some of these companies, part-time employees? And is it at all part of any of the cultures? I mean, I know that I haven't seen it a lot in the larger companies that are more office-based, rather than, obviously, retail's a whole different ball game with it.
Yeah, and we're not seeing a lot of it. I think it's like what we were talking about before we got on this call, right? Like, we're like, hey, you got to work a 9 to 5, like that. Either you're working or you're not. Like, how dare you decide that you can be outside of this model and still succeed? Or how dare you say, I need to take a step back because this isn't my focus right now. It's like, what? Like, that's okay. That's okay to let people make these decisions. But offices just aren't set up for it. It goes back to, like, we're struggling with remote work, even though we've done it for 2 years, right? Like, even though we've learned how to do it, we're like, all of a sudden the pandemic has lifted and we're like, I can't remember. Like, so if that's challenging, so is the part-time piece. So I'm not seeing it a lot, but I think it's a really important component, particularly for those, like you mentioned, like when people want to step out for 6 months to a year, wow, what a wonderful place for them and for the organization, because you're not missing that institutionalized knowledge that takes years to get, like, and part-time for some people, like let's say they've been in a corporation for 5 years or an organization for 5 years, their 20 hours looks so much different than someone who just got started.
Yeah.
So it's a shame we're not seeing it more. But, you know, I think part of it is, and then the other piece that we talked about is I think there's also some debates in the feminist community about whether or not we even support part-time. Are we saying, well, they have to go part-time because businesses can't support them full-time? And it's like, what we're really trying to get at is like, you're human, you can decide what's best for you. And can we create workplaces that enable, like create workplaces that like let people work the way that's best for them, and them hire workers who work best for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've nailed it really well for where we're coming from. And the institutional knowledge that you mentioned, I think that I've seen it in different, I talked about industries earlier, but there was an industry that I used to work with that I won't mention by name, but I felt like just in general, people would leave every 2 years. Like they'd go to another company, another organization, because they wanted to try something different, or there's more money, or whatever the issue was. And I kept thinking to myself, all this institutional knowledge, these relationships, all of that keep moving with these people. And if we can retain someone part-time because that's what they need for that stage of their life, and as we, it's women with children, it can be men, it doesn't have to be women. What about the generation that's now can't retire or don't want to retire because it's what keeps them going, right? That brain trust of people that we're saying,
And that's what I'm saying, is this is a fundamental shift. Like, this is why it feels so hard, even though I don't think it is as complicated. This is like, I say this all the time and people think I'm kidding. I'm like, if Amazon can drop me a box at my house within 12 hours, surely we can figure out how to make this whole work thing work, right? Like, but we don't want to right now. I think there's a lot of pushback because it is scary for all this change. You're saying that people who are 70 are allowed to work. You're saying women who have to take care of their elderly parents get a say on how they show up. You're saying that like this mom of a 2-year-old can ask for this. You're saying a dad can want to be a dad and stay home and create his own schedule in this way. Like that, I mean, I think that's what's blowing people's minds more than anything else. And they're like, wait, the social structure in which we work, in which we live, not just work, we live, is crumbling. And people are freaking out. Like, that's what I really see is happening. And I still think we all should keep pushing for what makes sense and what is right. Like, I know a lot of 70-year-olds who are brilliant minds. How dare us not utilize the brain trust that exists within them,
and think of them as a high level. I think that so many times I've been on something, and with people that I respect, and I'll talk about that I'm working with part-time, and inevitably someone will use the word temporary, or they'll use the word, entry level, and I'm like, they're not equivalent. It doesn't mean someone can't be entry level and part-time. It doesn't mean that they can't be temporary and part-time. Like, yes, they can, but you can be full-time and temporary. You can be full-time and entry level. I'm like, no, you can be a CEO, and it just blows my mind.
What's so funny about that is, coming from the coaching industry, that's the goal, right? The goal is to make 6-7 figures while working 20 hours a week. That is almost everyone's goal. And they are applauded, right? They're applauded for that. And yet when we try to apply it somewhere else, oh no. I'm like, why not?
And when you think about it, to your point, the person that's been there 5 years is so much more valuable to a company because they have the institutional knowledge. They know how your company works, right? So you're not reinventing the wheel. But if I go to a company and say, I love doing X, Y, and Z. Now I'm coming in super stoked. And I say coming in, like doing my job. I don't physically have to be there. But coming to my job, super stoked to do X, Y, or Z, not doing the BS that I didn't really like, that kind of sat on my plate and I didn't do well. I'm, in my experience, a part-time person, oftentimes because they know they have fewer hours, they're so much more productive than I sometimes. I joke sometimes that Isabella, who works for me part-time, probably is way more productive than I am some days, because she has that window and she's like, I'm going to use it efficiently. It's incredible.
It really is. I mean, and that's often my argument when it comes to moms, right? Like, when you have, let's say 9 to 5, when that's it, like the stuff you get done, I mean, it's truly mind blowing, myself included. Like, I did a lot. Like, I was very productive pre-kids. Oh my goodness. Like, the things that I can get done now, it's kind of mind blowing because I am so hyper focused and I don't doubt myself. So and I ask for help. So it's like, one, I'm like, I have an angle. I'm rushing to the end of my day in a good way. Second, I'm not sitting here doubting, like, particularly for females, right? Like, we have been pushed to doubt ourselves quite a bit. And like, we've been conditioned to do that. And now I'm like, I got this time. This is how it feels. My gut is correct. You know what I mean? I'm gonna keep going and move forward. And the other piece is, if I need help, instead of sitting there and saying like, should I? Is that? I have this many hours in my day. I'm gonna get me some help. Well, like, so the asking, that fear of asking, it minimizes when you become part-time or a working mom or something of that nature.
So how can we support the work that you're doing?
Thank you for asking that question. And two things come up. I think the first is, if you're on LinkedIn, would love if you take a follow and comment and be involved on my social. I find it interesting. I think so, and I love, and I like, not just what I write, but like the comments are really interesting, and the conversations back and forth. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, if there are groups that you know of that need support, either in conversation around this or facilitation or analyzation of it, or analyzing it, like, I would love to speak, talk, or work with those groups.
Awesome. And you have 2 websites. I don't know if you want to give both of them out or not.
Yeah, retainHER.co is where I am. Like I said, I've coached for a very long time, and I am Erica Ballard. I still have people come in looking for coaching. I really, really, really enjoy it. So I do it, but my shift has been really focused since my daughter Isabel has been born. I have really focused in on speakings, trainings, and this diagnostic work, as it moves the needle in such a big way. And so that's what I want to continue to focus on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And again, I'm Linda with the Talented Alliance of Part-Time Professionals, and we've been talking with Erica Ballard, and this has been fabulous. So thank you. And at this point on, you can